Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Here's what we're going to do. I am in the process of preparing what I think is going to be a very powerful broadcast. It's going to be talking about Trump's speech to the UN. He said some things and did some things that are very important, and I think it ties into Bible prophecy. I'm also afraid to say that I think it's very possibly going to get him in some really big, deep trouble. And I'm going to tie that together with Bible prophecy, with what the prophets are saying, and also with what Lindsey Williams was told by some of the elite in his new DVD, which, by the way, if you haven't got it, you know, look, guys, don't think somebody's got to fill up a 2.5-hour DVD to make it worth the gift that we ask for it. Sometimes if it's just one sentence from one of the elites, could make all the difference in your decisions. And this new DVD, What Remains to be Seen in 2017 by Lindsey Williams, I think it's got some, again, maybe just one sentence might be extremely important for you. So if you haven't got it, recommend you go get it. Now, yes, I'll agree, sometimes there's some things in there that don't necessarily affect you, but that's okay. We're looking for the one nugget that makes it all worth it for us. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to continue playing the audio concerning this Halloween gift offer. Now, there's actually 3 DVDs and a book in it. We only do this about once a year. Got a few more broadcasts I'm going to do on that. Then I'm going to be bringing in here some stuff on Trump. Matter of fact, I may even do this stuff on Trump tomorrow. But for today, we're going to go and listen to some of this stuff about Halloween and the occult holidays. Now, the 3 DVDs in the book that we're offering are What's Wrong with Halloween by Dr. Jack Cluney, which we're about to hear today, Occult Holidays Revealed, Stephen Dollins, an ex-Satanist high priest, America's Occult Holidays by Doc Marquis, and then the book is Under the Spell of Harry Potter. Right now, let's go listen to What's Wrong with Halloween by Dr. Jack Cluney.
I find people with onks. There may be people in this sanctuary today or listening to this tape today that wear an onk as an alternative cross. It is an Egyptian sign for reincarnation and some other things. This was also found in this kid's room. Satanic pendants, sometimes representing times of ritual. This is a calendar. One of my favorite. This is a pendant worn by a first degree in the temple. Church of Satan, founded by Anton LaVey in San Francisco. City of other strange things also, but we're not talking about those today. This kid had done his homework. In order to get this pendant, you can't buy it. You have to, other symbols, crystals, mystic symbols like unicorns. No unicorns in the Bible, by the way. There was another piece of jewelry. You're not going to believe this. In fact, let me be honest to you, that if I didn't see it, that's why I photographed it. In fact, it is still in my possession today. This is the pendant, handmade, and something on the other end. Now, as naive as even I've been around this business for a long time. I am the longest surviving investigator, private sector investigator in this particular area. I was even naive and I didn't pay much attention. This is mummified human flesh. And when the law enforcement agency in that particular area was notified of this, I got, Barbie had a bad day. Ken was arrested, but stayed in jail 45 minutes. I can tell you stories. Now, this came from a church field outside a church in Apache Junction, Arizona. And walking around this church to see if there was any satanic activity happening directed at the church, we find this little plateau up on some rocks, and we found a bunch of things, but this one, if you look right here, it looks like a shadow, but it's actually burnt. So there was a fire involved here, and this was used, and I wish I could tell you that this is an isolated incident, but it absolutely is not. We find things like this all over the country. In central Illinois, grave marker. I got a call from the local sheriff's department one morning in my office. It was from my friend the detective, and he said, Jack, I'm on the way. Be ready. Have your camera ready. I'm coming to get you. I said, what's going on? He said, I don't have time. About 5 minutes later, lights and siren came into my driveway, and I was a pastor at the time. Imagine what happens when a county sheriff's detective's car pulls into the parsonage driveway, lights and siren, and I enter the back seat. Imagine the rumors. He speeds me out into the country, an old abandoned cemetery. Some people thought it was abandoned. This gravestone was between the gate, an open gate. The reason you don't see the gate, you can see a little post on the side here. The reason that doesn't show, because I needed to show the detail in this, this is an upside-down cross and an open grave. Open grave was about 120 years old. It was a child's grave. A ritual called for at that particular time of year, called for the remains of one grave mixed with the remains of a new sacrifice and reburied. Now, we didn't want the news involved in this, but they were listening to the police radio. And prisoner in Texas. Why do I get so much out of Texas? Because cops in Texas are so fed up. I mean, they send me film. We process our own film. We don't trust the local labs. We process our own film. They send me rolls of film. They know their bosses aren't going to do anything with it, so they just send it to me. We process it, and we take anything out and then let them know if there was anything that they should be looking for. In this picture, let me see if I can show you here. Well, in this picture, you'll see lines coming down the chest. Okay, this man was involved in a form of witchcraft called Santeria, or Santa Maria. It's called Santeria, actually. It is a Latin form of witchcraft in which they cut themselves and bleed and mix all of their blood into one cup and drink it as a form of communion. There are other markings on his body, pentagram on his foot. Well, Brother Jack, that's just a star. No, it isn't. If you look at it from opposite, not the way he's looking at it, but the way somebody else is looking at it, it's a pentagram or it's an upside-down star. Grave markers. I want to, if I were to visit 3 graveyards in this community or any community throughout the United States, I would be able to find satanic or witchcraft activity. Guaranteed. You might not see it, but I will. This is somewhat obvious. This was the same graveyard as the open grave, shot about 2 weeks before. I knew something was going to happen. Headstone. This is the headstone for this gravestone. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole story here, but I was with a lieutenant this day from the local sheriff's department. My friend was with me also. But his boss was there because he wanted to put an end to this garbage that we were doing. And we walk up to this. He said, how do you know that this is organized? This whole graveyard is desecrated. It is vandalism. Therefore, that's what the report's going to say. And I said, come here, let me look at this. I said, here is a grave marker, is a capstone. Please notice that if it was vandalism, that the head of the would have been marked, chipped, and there would have been a dent in the ground because this thing weighs about 3,000 pounds. I said, please notice that it's 9 feet away. 9 feet, not 6, not 10, 9 feet away. It's laying directly plumb, directly level to this one here, and there's no indentation. How did it get from here? If it was merely vandalism, it would have ended up right here on the gravestone. These are bones found about a half a mile upriver from where a little girl disappeared. Little girl who later was found mutilated, sexually assaulted, and obviously dead. German Shepherd dog. Around a certain holiday that white supremacists like to celebrate, also tied into the calendar, also related to Halloween, but not on Halloween. Dog's throat slit. Another animal. This was a pig. That's kind of obvious, I think. But what happens here? What happens here happens in every community in the United States about a series of stories. A series of stories that I hope you will listen to, because they're absolutely, because I was there in all of them. I'm not telling you something about something that I heard about. I was there on every single story that I'm going to tell you about today. Every one of them. Every one of them is factual. Every one of them can be documented in any community here in the United States. But before I do that, I want to draw your attention to the fact that Halloween is one festival in between a series of holidays, starting around the 7th to the 11th of September and ending December 24th. Lacey Peterson disappeared right prior to Christmas. She was pregnant. You know what the sacrifice called for at that time is? It's a way to disgrace the virgin birth. It requires a young female. Was Lacey Peterson killed by Satanists? I don't know. But the coincidences are rather obvious. So what I want you to do is I want you to listen as we go through this, because unless I tell you differently, I was there and I witnessed all of these cases. And they're factual, and they really happen, and they really represent real people. And it would be a sin for us, because these people have been damaged, they've been hurt, and sometimes killed. Let's listen and understand that these are real people. All right, you ready? Married late in life. Many of us thought that Jim was an individual that would stay single forever. That wasn't the case. He met a woman who was involved in some, strange forms of religious practice. But, everybody has a little different. Married this woman, and all of a sudden, things started to progress. Come to find out that she was a witch. Gradually, Jim came from being comfortable with his wife's religion. Jim's wife contracted cancer suddenly, died almost as suddenly, in the middle of October. Jim apparently attempted suicide. Now, we were involved at that time. I got the call. I took an elder in our church of mine and met a pastor friend of mine in Tucson, and we went and prayed over Jim, and we bound the forces of evil, and he did not die. Came and lived with us for a while. And that's the last time I saw Jim. That's the last time I saw him. When we understood what was going on, we got mad. And many pastors at the time said, brother, being mad about it is not spiritual. But they didn't understand what I understand today. The rest of the story, and here it is. Jim was killed by a method they call cueing. And what would happen over time is they would teach him certain things, and he would forget when he did certain things. So here's the story. His wife died, be around the house, and they would have compassionate phone calls. And the woman, say I was a woman, answered, on the phone, Jim answered the phone, and Jim said, hello, and this woman would say, hey, brother, how are you? How are you doing? And Jim would say, well, if it wasn't for this headache, I'd be okay. Migraine headaches almost all his life. She said, well, we'll be praying for you. Another call, Jim, how are you? Well, if it wasn't for this headache, I'd be okay. Jim, how are you? This might happen over a period of hours, maybe even days. Jim, how are you? If it wasn't for this headache, I'd be great. Now, there was a doctor in this spiritualist church. There was a medical doctor. And the medical doctor would eventually call. We knew this was going on. The medical doctor would call and said, Jim, how you doing? And he would say, if it wasn't for this headache, I'd be okay. The doctor would say, well, do you have any of your wife's medicine around? And he said, yeah, matter of fact, I do. And the doctor said, well, why don't you take this and go to bed and let me know if you don't feel better. Jim would say, great, thanks, doc, I really needed that. Jim would go and take the medicine. So he would go to bed, get another telephone call. Hey, brother, how are you? Pretty compassionate. Don't you wish every church in the United States was that good at being compassionate? If it wasn't for this headache, I'd be okay. Then they would say, are you taking anything? He would remember, oh yeah, Dr. So-and-so called, and told me to take this. When I get done with this phone call, I'll go and take it. So he would take it again and forget that he took it. And this happened over a period of time. In January of 1984, Jim died. I got a call, and the estimated time of his death was 5 days previous. I never went down to view the body. I talked to the funeral director, subsequently talked to the coroner, and the coroner said there's something really strange about this, and we should have known at the time. But they ruled it as there were 20 different drugs in his body at the time of death. And that is minus what would have been there if they would have done the toxicology right away. So 5 days later, there were 27 drugs, ranging from Tylenol to morphine and everything in between, Oxycontin, so on and so forth. Over time, an increased amount of drugs, he died of a massive cerebral hemorrhages in 3 areas of the brain. In other words, his brain blew up. So I decided, once all this come together, and I finally got the autopsy report when I was doing an investigation in Tucson, Arizona. A cop in Tucson Police Department made a telephone call to the county, got me a copy of the report after a lot of trouble, and called me, and he read the report, and he said, Dr. Cluney, would you like me to reopen this as a murder investigation? And you know what? My family thinks I'm weird anyways. So I said, no, I don't want you to do that. Some years later, 15 years later, there would have been some problems with investigation and so on. He was cremated, so there was no body to disinter and so on. When we look at cases like this, we get reports all the time. There was a case in Lockport, of a girl found in a dumpster, surgically mutilated. And when I was a consultant for a particular sheriff's department at the time, I called the police department, identified myself as a consultant to XYZ County Sheriff's Department, and talked to the investigator, and he said, well, this is just an isolated incident. In law enforcement language, isolated incident means I don't care. I'm not going to do anything about it. Surgical dismembering. This was not a hack job. This was surgical dismembering of a body, of a female body, there again tied to holidays that would have been appropriate to them. To this day, that case has not been. In fact, in my book, I have mentioned a girl's name. I'm going to call her Sarah. That's not her name. I do not mention her name in the book for obvious reason. Sarah came, I got involved from a county mental health department. County mental health department called me and said there's something deeper that we're not getting. Well, this woman was multiple personality, and there was some spiritual things and so on and so forth. I worked with this woman for several months. I walked into the office one day, and I looked at the therapist, and I said, today's the day. What would happen if an exorcism broke out in your office today? And she said, well, whatever it takes. Well, this woman was as heathen as that chair is. I mean, there was no spirit about this woman whatsoever. But she knew that there was something there that she hadn't struck. So in dealing, when I walked in to the counseling room, not the counselor's office, but the counseling room, this woman was in a fetal position with a pillow facing the wall, the corner of the room by the door. I said, I'm not going to play games anymore. So we started taking command over the demonic forces at the time. We got her up to a chair. This took about 3 hours all total. Got her up to the chair, and then she started speaking to me in a language that wasn't her. In fact, it was a male voice. At that point, I knew that I had hit a target, and I just said, look, we're gonna do this for good. And we went through the process and led her to Christ. Now, she was a demon-worshiping, her story's in the book, her complete story's in the book. Her testimony, by the way, is published. That's what I published. She gave her testimony before my church in my last pastorate. Maybe that's why I was my last pastorate. But I want to read you part of this. I am standing before you, reading from this paper because what I want to say is so important to me that I feel that I must write it so that I get all the content. I tend to get very nervous when I have to speak to groups of people, but what I say is so important that I felt that I'd better have it in writing so I didn't forget anything. I am a survivor of a satanic ritual abuse. I know Jack has spoken to you on this subject in the past, but I wanted to let you know how real the problem is. Jack has said to me on occasion that people speaks on these things because no one has ever come in contact with someone who has survived. I want to tell you that you, even before you met me, in fact, you have probably met people who are actively engaged in such abuse. They are bankers in your everyday life that look the same as you look. She goes on to say, most often, that people just do not believe her. She goes on to say, and she names what she was called in the cult and so on, and I left that kind of blank. At the age of 12, she was adopted or adapted, if you will, into this cult. I attempted suicide at that time for the first time, tried to commit suicide at the age of 12 for the first time. I have lived most of my life with no real grasp of reality, in fear of demons, night fears, flashbacks, and triggers by seeing something that means something in the occult. I tried to get help through psychology. She goes on to tell that, she said, when I met Jack, he introduced me to whom I knew, he introduced me to Jesus Christ. And I stand before you today to tell you, now that's the beginning of the story. Now what happened in between the time, this is a lesbian Satanist, a lot of lesbianism and Satanism and witchcraft. But she came to my office. I'd never brought the subject up. I knew she was a lesbian. I never brought the subject up, though. We led her to the Lord, took care of the problem. A week later, she calls me, and she said, can I come to see you? And I said, sure, come on, I'm in the office. So she came to see me, sat right in front of my desk, and she said these words, going through what I've gone through in the last week, that the life I'm living, I mean, the Spirit of God had talked to her in a week to convince her. I had never said anything to her. It's the Spirit of God that must work in people's lives, must work through you. There are many other stories. A little girl in El Paso, Texas, one of my favorite stories. You know, confusion is a sign that you're winning. Not confusion in the church, but confusion in the enemy's camp. I believe in what I call a deviant kind of warfare. In other words, keep your mouth shut and just do it. This girl, approximately 4 years old, 4 years old, I got a telephone call one day, one from a parent, father, said, I'm in a custody battle. And she has informed me that this girl was bred for the purpose of taking over the coven. And I'm in a custody battle, and the courts are going to give this girl to my ex-wife. And I said, well, maybe yes, maybe no, probably no. And he said, well, what's the process? And I told him what the process was. So finally, we took a team to El Paso, Texas, to investigate this woman. We spent 2.5 days in El Paso, Texas. The bottom of the story is that the coven found out that we were in town about the time we were landing back in St. Louis. When they found out, confusion broke out in the ranks. It was scheduled for court. We had met with the attorney while we were in town. When I gave the report to this client of mine, he looked at me and he got so excited. He said, we've got to expose this. And I said, you've got to keep your mouth shut. He said, we're supposed to expose this. I said, it will be exposed. Keep your mouth shut. You know, what I mean by, covert warfare is digging a tunnel. Digging a tunnel, that's your job, At the end of the tunnel, there is an arsenal. All right, God has placed it there. It's preordained. There's an arsenal there, and your job is to dig the tunnel. Now, dig a tunnel. We get to a point in that place where the arsenal is. We can assume that the enemy's camp is directly above. So we punch a hole in the ground and we blast everything in sight, and we come back down through the tunnel, bury the tunnel again, and we start digging another tunnel. So what we did in El Paso is it went to court. And the first one called to stand was the boyfriend of the The boyfriend of the ex-wife, he gets on the stand, he gets sworn in, he makes some comment during the time he was sworn in about God or something, just under his breath, nobody really. And then he said, I want to say something. And the judge says, well, that's highly unusual. And he said, well, I'd just like to say something before Mr. Jones, the attorney, comes up. Mr. Jones is not his name. And the judge finally said, okay, say something. Both my fiance and I are proud practicing Satanists. And the judge, you can imagine what was taken on in the courtroom. My client, all of a sudden, remembered what I had told him, that confusion is a sign that you're winning. Confusion broke out in the courtroom, was befuddled. He looked at the guy in the stand and he said, would you repeat that? And he repeated it. He said, would you repeat that again? He said something to the effect, I don't believe what I'm hearing. And he told him again. And the judge says, I still don't believe what I'm hearing. Are you saying, and he repeated it back to him in his own language, that is what I'm saying. We are proud practicing. There was an anointed judge on the bench. Picks up the gavel and says, case dismissed, full custody, and permission to remove the girl from the state of Texas is granted. And he walked off the stand shaking his head. There was a website at a major old-time university. There was a website that we dug up. So blatant. It was on a university website, but on the website. So we exposed it. I called the school, and the school wouldn't do anything about it. Okay? I dropped press releases on every newspaper, TV station, radio station in the area, saying that the school was sponsoring witchcraft, Satanism, human sacrifice, because that's what was on the website. It didn't take them long to get it off the website. You stand up to the devil's going to do something. He's going to flee.
I'm going to interrupt the broadcast right there, but I'm also going to tell you that this is one of our best offers. It's called the Halloween gift offer. You get 3 DVDs and a book valued at $100 for $30. That's for $30 for 3 DVDs and a book. First one is What's Wrong with Halloween? Dr. Jack Cluney, a ranking authority on Satanism, witchcraft, white supremacy, and other forms of cult and occult activity. He has assisted the FBI, CIA, OSI, Border Patrol, Sheriff in several occult-related crimes, ordained Baptist minister, expert witness in court proceedings. You'll learn street-level spiritual warfare from a man of God who walks it every day. Second, Occult Holidays Revealed. Stephen Dollins, an ex-Satanist high priest of the Church of Satan, reveals the origins behind Christmas, Easter, Halloween. Easter is actually celebrating the birth of Ishtar. Halloween is a celebration of Samhain, the Celtic lord of the dead. The third DVD is America's Occult Holidays. Doc Marquis was raised in a cultic Illuminati family. He attained the rank of third-degree Master Witch. His family was in the Illuminati for 7 generations. That's 189 years. Doc says Christmas is an ancient occultic ceremony dedicated to the birthday of Tammuz. Easter's shifting date is determined by astrology. Halloween is the deadliest holiday in human history. You'll learn the truth about occult practices like bobbing for apples, trick-or-treat, jack-o'-lantern, May Day, and a lot more. And the book Under the Spell of Harry Potter. Stephen Dollins, an ex-Satanist high priest, shows you how the Satanists use Harry Potter as a recruiting tool. It actually teaches your children to cast spells, use potions, curses, and there's no difference between good and evil. It indirectly prepares children to receive the mark of the beast. 3 DVDs and a book valued at $100, all available for a gift of just $30. And if you order by Friday, October 21st, you'll get it before Halloween. It's the Halloween gift offer. 3 DVDs and a book valued at $100 for a gift of $30. 785-266-1112 or prophecyclub.com. It's the Halloween gift offer, prophecyclub.com, 785-266-1112. Order today.